welcome everyone to our Get a Better Night's Sleep program. I'm Vicki Novak, a librarian at the Sun City Library, part of the Maricopa County Library District in Arizona. Today we have with us Dr. Sairam Parthasarathy, and he is the director of the Center for Sleep and Circadian Sciences at the University of Arizona Health Sciences, and also medical director of the Center for Sleep Disorders at Banner University Medical Center in Tucson. Since we are meeting remotely, I'm going to take my mask off. Hello, Dr. Parthasarathy. Thank you for joining us. We are really honored to have you share your expertise with us. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
That's great. What made you first become interested in studying sleep?
It was quite serendipitous. I stumbled into it because my background is in pulmonary and critical care, which is my parents' specialty. But I happened to get an opportunity to do a few months of sleep medicine towards the end of my training. Actually, a year after my training, that allowed me to actually jump into the field. I was looking at patients who are on life support machines on a ventilator in an ICU, and then I got exposed to sleep, and I was struck by how the brain works, and I decided I was going to see how the brain sleeps when someone is critically ill on a ventilator, which is very relevant today during COVID pandemic times. So a lot of people are on ventilators, what it does to their brains, how they sleep when they're in the ICU, how do they sleep when they're in the hospital, and what are the ramifications to their immune system, their bodies, their health, and also upon survival from the ICU. What is the impact on their cognition, memory, and quality of life after they discharge from the hospital? So those all became my areas of research. And so that was my entry into sleep.
Oh, well, thank you. So I will turn it over to you and we'll hear what you have to say on this subject. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again. I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to talk to you all. My charter today is to talk to you about getting a better night's sleep. As I just mentioned, it's an area of deep interest in both the clinical care as well as research on my part and the group here. And so we'll dive right into it. So I just wanted off, see if I can advance these slides here. I don't have any, I have funding from International Institutes of Health and the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. And I do, get, royalty from UpToDate, which is an educational software, as well as I have a patent about a breathing device, which I'll not be talking about today. So this is the dolphin sleep test. I always use this in my slides. So, if you see anything other than two dolphins, it probably means you need to take a few days off. Probably need to get sleep. And so we all very stressed. We all have a lot of things going on right now, as well as people work really hard, or people have lost their jobs and facing financial stress. And so these are tough times, and sleep is very important. It's one of the three pillars of health. You need to be able to get good nutrition. The diet is very important, what you eat and what you eat in moderation. Exercise is very important. It's the second pillar of health. We are all meant to exercise. We're not meant to travel by escalators and elevators and vehicles. We were meant to be hunters and gatherers originally, and so our body doesn't do well if we don't get enough exercise, and that's important both for the body and the brain. But the third important thing is sleep. And if we don't get enough sleep, we're going to have lots of ramifications and effects on the body. So while we're talking about what you should be doing and such, it's also important for you to understand what is sleep and why we're doing what we're doing. But of course, if people are seeing two cows up there, you really need to give me a call after this. Maybe Ms. Novak can give you my contact information. So why do we sleep? So why is that important? Well, mankind, men and women, babies, aged, everybody needs to sleep X amount of hours, or need for sleep increases as we get younger, or it decreases as we get older. And so there is the sort of age-related normative values. How much sleep do I need really depends upon my age. And so when we're younger, we sleep, 16, 17 hours or 18 hours every day. And we don't sleep just, once at night when we're babies. We sleep multiple times during the course of a day. And so we need sleep. But if you say an average adult needs, 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, it's almost a third of the day. That means we spend a third of our lifetime. We take all the days that we are alive. A third of our lifetime we spend asleep. So it's got to be something really important that we spend a third of our lifetime sleeping. And so I just want you to, remember that. But yes, cows and dolphins also need to sleep. Interestingly, dolphins, because they're mammals that are swimming in water or underwater, if they sleep, they're going to drown because they breathe air. They don't breathe, they don't have gills like fish. And so interestingly, dolphins have one half of the brain that's asleep at any given point in time. Part of the brain that is awake is the one that's steering the dolphin through the waters, making sure it surfaces, breathes air, goes back down underwater. And then when that brain is tired, it goes to sleep, and the other brain awakens so that the dolphin can always remain afloat and not drown because it fell asleep in the water. So, and they need to, sleep as well. Flies, a housefly sleep. You may see some flies sometimes, they just, stare and they don't seem to see your hand coming at them to, swatting them. That's because they were asleep at that point in time. Usually they're very sensitive to, any change in air current and they fly away, but there are times when they can be caught napping, so to speak. So every living animal, creature, needs sleep. So there has to be, if you're sleeping a third of your lifetime, all these creatures need to sleep. It's got to be very important. So why? Why is it that we sleep? So in the past, Galilei, I'm back in the 16th century, 17th century, postulated that sleep is important because the brain needs to wash itself off of bad humor. Very prescient of him to have, suggested that as a mechanism. Of course, he's done major advancements in astronomy and whatnot, but this was his understanding of sleep, and he was not at all far from the truth. It wasn't until the year 2013, literally 7-8 years ago, that researchers from UC Berkeley, studied mice, and they looked at these tracers. They had this orange tracer and the green tracer, and they studied, the brain, which is shown as a cube in panel B in the bottom left. And essentially, I'll show a nice cartoon over here which summarizes what happens. This is that the brain is like a sponge, and the brain is floating in fluid called cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, inside of her brain cavity. And there is this fluid, or CSF, that it's essentially floating. In fact, it's a buffer, it moves chemicals, proteins, and everything around. It's like a solution. So it's like a sponge floating in a solution that's inside a box, which is our skull. But then there's lymph in the brain, and the lymph cleanses or clears or washes the brain cells off of the bad humor and protein that's left behind. So you'll see that in this cartoon on the right side of the brain, when the mouse is asleep, you can see there is a 60% increase in the amount of what we call interstitial fluid. And that means there's fluid in between the cells of the brain. It's essentially fluid inside of the sponge. As opposed to when the mouse is awake, you can see that there's nearly a 60% reduction in the amount of fluid. So it's almost like a high tide and a low tide. So when you're asleep, it's high tide, and when you awaken, it's low tide, and all of the bad humor in your brain has been washed off during that particular cycle that we went through. So it's not very dissimilar. This is a satellite view of Italy, and zoom up view of Venice, and you have all these rivulets and waterways that are there that are sort of washing away. Not only they're great to go on gondolas and whatnot, but they're also washing away effluent from the city. I used to, although they may have modern drainage systems now. And so that's essentially very, very similar to how the brain is. This is essentially a microscopic view of the brain surface, or the cortex, which is where we do all of our thinking. And you can see that there are these rivulets, which are essentially these lymphatic systems, these little tiny, tiny rivulets that join to form rivers, and that drain and wash the brain off of the lymph and all of the bad humor that accumulates when the brain has been active and puts out all of these proteins out. And what is interesting is that these are the researchers who discovered that, and they went so far as to put in something called the beta amyloid protein, and they labeled it with radionuclide tracers so that they can see where they are. And what they found was when the mouse is asleep, it removes these beta amyloid proteins. These beta amyloid proteins are the bad humor that are being washed off. These same beta amyloid proteins are the precursors, or the pre-runners, or the building blocks of making these tangles and plaques in the brain that causes Alzheimer's disease. So this is a very important research study finding, suggesting that during sleep we have the brain being washed off the bad humor, and what accumulates, or what is being cleansed, is essentially the same protein that actually could accumulate and form neurofibrillary tangles, which actually cause are part and parcel of the disease process of Alzheimer's disease. So this is important. So what we know is that sleep is actively cleanses the brain and scrubs the brain of bad humor, such as beta amyloid protein. There's other proteins that may be cleansing it as well, but at least this is a pretty major finding. It wasn't until the year 2013 that we really could pin this on that. Prior to that, we knew what would happen if you didn't get enough sleep, and we would do sleep deprivation experiments. We'd deprive people of sleep and say, oh, they can't do this, or the brain can't do that, or the heart can't do that. But we never could say, what did sleep do proactively? What did it do proactively to make you healthy? And this is one of the things that it's doing. So there's a lot of research going on in sleep and Alzheimer's, especially up in Maricopa County in Alzheimer's Institute. That's very telling and applicable to some of this that I'm sharing. So, but then why do we sleep at night? Well, why don't we sleep during the day? Well, it's because, at any given point in time, either we are night side of the Earth or the day side of the Earth, and the light actually goes in through our eyes to the central part of the brain. It's an area that's right above our pituitary gland. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN for short. And this is a clock that we have inside of our brain. It's a master clock. It sets our hormones, our rhythms, our sleep-wake cycle, when we want to sleep and when should we be awake, and all of those rhythms are in there. And that the light from the sun and from our ambient space goes through our eyes and goes to the back of the brain, into the center of the brain process, right between the lines that connect the center of your, nasal, nasion is what we call it, just the space above your nose bridge, and somewhere midpoint here, right above in front of your ear. That's where the pituitary gland is, right on top of that, right smack in the middle of the brain, or the bottom of the brain, but in the middle of your skull is where the suprachiasmatic nucleus is. And so it goes and gives it input, and it actually makes a certain protein that says, oh, this is sleep time, because it's connected to the pineal gland and the melatonin system, and that gives a cue to the body saying, oh, the sun set about an hour or 2 hours ago, and so it's a little darker now. Now is when the melatonin starts synthesizing, because the light is not coming in from the eyes and suppressing the melatonin synthesis. And the melatonin spike that's created by the pineal gland, which is also right next to it, sends a message saying, oh, this is that time that's approaching us. And so over the next hour and a half to 2 hours, the hormone level builds up, and that's why we get sleepy at, be it 10 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, depending upon what your rhythm is. Now, if light were not there, if we all went and lived in a cave, this is what would happen. What is shown here is the time period when someone's awake, shown in solid horizontal line, and a dashed horizontal line showing the time that they're asleep. And what is on the sort of the y-axis is each consecutive day, starting from 1 up on top, all the way up to the 10th day. During that time period, this person is on the surface of the earth. Starting the 10th day, they're asked to go into a cave where they don't get any light cues from the outside. And when that happens, you can see that every day they start shifting their time by about a half an hour or so. They start slipping to the point that they could, over a matter of another 9 to 10 days, it could be diametrically opposite. Even though they're in the same part of the world, it could be keeping the wake and sleep times of someone diametrically on the other side of the globe, like in India, which is 12 hours away from us, 12 and a half hours away from us. So essentially, this person went into the cave, but 10 days later is keeping the same rhythm as someone who's living in India on the other side of the globe, rather than on this side of the globe. It's because our circadian clock tends to be a little longer than the spin of the Earth, and it's 24 hours and change, a few extra minutes, that it always needs light. Just like the books that are nicely stacked in the Maricopa Public Library. But there's one book that's jutting out. And so what you do is you tap the book back in so that it's nice and flush along with the rest of the books. Sunlight does that. Every time your sleep tends to lag or slack, or your clock tends to go off rhythm, sunlight taps it right back in. And that's why you keep a particular rhythm to your sleep. And that's why you sleep at night, because of those changes and the effect of light on the pineal gland and your master clock that's in the center of your brain. But if you don't have that light exposure, your rhythm starts to slip. And so this is very telling, and it's very relevant to some of the things we're going to be talking about. So now when you understand why do we sleep, and why do we sleep at night, and questions like that, then it becomes a little bit easier for us to understand when someone says, well, you shall do this or you shall do that. Then it makes sense as to why it's connected to our bodies and why it would help us or why something would hurt us. So there's a common misconception. Yeah.
I was going to ask, so is it important for people to get light exposure during the day at a certain time?
Yeah. It is important to get bright sunlight. That's why, when I moved from Chicago to Arizona, I felt sharper and felt healthier because I got more sunlight here than I did in Chicago. And so getting exposed to bright sunlight in the morning is healthy, and getting exercise as part of that is healthier. And so right there, you've got two things straightened out. Is you got, you are more alert, and two, you're getting physical exercise. Of course, you need to protect your skin from the chance of skin cancer and such. So wear sunblock, wear a hat, wear glasses, shades, but then go out. And so that will help. The other way in which it helps us is that because you're exposed to sunlight during the early morning, you're more likely to fall more easily asleep at night because it entrains your rhythm. It taps the book that's off kilter in the bookshelf back into space, which means that you're sharper, more alert in the morning. You're just not awake in the morning. You're awake and alert in the morning, which means you're more likely to be sleepy come sleep time that night. And so there's some research showing that exposure to blue light in the morning can actually make people more vigilant and more sharper, more alert during the day, and allow them to sleep more on time that night, which is good. That's because sunlight has blue light in it. Sunlight has all of the spectrum of light. And so it's the same thing, is that if you expose yourself to sunlight early in the morning, it is good. So, there's a misconception that, wake means the brain is essentially a machine that's turned on, and sleep means it's it's like a switch, it's like our bedroom light that we flick the switch off, and that they're asleep. No, actually, that is not, that's a misconception. During sleep, your brain is actually active. Actually, during dream sleep, your brain is consuming just as much amount of oxygen and glucose as it's consuming when you're awake and alert. And so during dream sleep, the brain is actually actively synthesizing, and essentially what it's doing is it's doing like janitorial work, in some ways. It's cleaning up the place. There's a lot of paper and trash that's been left by people who work in the office during the day. And at nighttime, the janitorial service comes around and they clean up everything. They vacuum the place. They put the files that are on the desk, neatly file them and put them away in your memory banks. They label them and put them away in your memory banks, your day's event. So then tomorrow, when you go through your file organizer, it's neatly labeled. This was the wedding I attended, or this is the birthday party I attended, and so on and so forth. And so you can go and find it in a folder that's nicely labeled and stacked away and filed away. You can find it the next day. So dream sleep is actually important for memory consolidation. And so that's why, it's a pretty active process. It's doing not only cleaning up the place, but it's also like, we talked about how it's cleansing the brain of all the bad humor, but it's also organizing your memories. So it becomes important. And it's also recharging your brain in some ways because it's giving it rest so that it can wake up in the morning. So, and so it's important that you recharge your brain just as much you recharge your cell phone. If I forget to charge my cell phone one night, my next day is a little bit of a disaster because I'm running around trying to find some outlet somewhere and trying to plug my cell phone in because I'm at 23% and I still have the rest of the day to go and a lot of phone calls to answer. So that's what happens if you don't get enough sleep at night, because you're trying to snooze here and there and you're just dragging along and you're not at your best because you did not recharge your brain at night. So it's a simplistic way of looking at the importance of sleep. And so what this is a sort of a graph that I'm showing you about how ICU staff, which is very relevant, Arizona, Maricopa County, Pima County, all the state of Arizona has the unfortunate distinction of being the number one for COVID pandemic right now in the entire globe. It's the second time we've gotten here after the month of July in 2020, and we really don't want to be here. But I wanted to say that the ICU staff are working really hard. Myself, I completed a 3-week of ICU stint the day before yesterday after working through the holidays. And it can really erode on your sleep. And if you don't get, not because you didn't want to sleep, but you did not have the opportunity to sleep because you were busy working. And this is essentially a bunch of house staff and fellows who work in an ICU. This is back when I was in Chicago and I did this research. And what we did was we put them in a room and we turned the light off and we had electrodes in their brain to monitor how quickly they fall asleep once the light is flicked, the bedroom light is switched off. And you can see that some people, and what you see up on top is 100% of people are awake before the light was switched off. Each green dot tells you someone's falling asleep at that particular time. So you can see cumulatively the proportion of people that are falling asleep over the next 20 minutes. And so what you can see is that at 18 minutes after we switched off the light during the day, this is actually during the day, at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., noon, 2 p.m., 4 p.m., we give them 5 opportunities, 5 naps, and we see how quickly they fall asleep, and then for each one of the naps, and then we average it together. This is how we measure how sleepy someone is based on how quickly they fall asleep. So which means that the sleepier you are, the quicker it is for you to fall asleep when the light is switched off. And you can see that, no one was awake past 18 minutes, and about 10 minutes, 2/3 of them were asleep. So that means that, they are sleeping and they are sleep deprived. And so this has ramifications to how, as the healthcare delivery safety and things of that nature to these people. And it's very important that you get, adequate sleep. So what is the connection to health? So we understood a little bit about why we sleep, how we sleep, when do we sleep, and why we sleep when we sleep, and things of that nature. But what's the connection to sleep? Now, if you give yourself the opportunity to charge your brain, go to sleep, but for some reason the plug is not working and your brain is not charging, in other words, you're not able to sleep, you have insomnia. And some of the features of insomnia are difficulty falling asleep or initiating sleep, difficulty maintaining sleep, and early morning awakening, where people go to sleep at around 8:39 or 9:30, but then they wake up at 2:30 and they can't go back to sleep again. An early morning awakening, and they just stay awake. They didn't get enough sleep, and they are awake, at 2:33 in the morning, and they can't fall asleep. Or they sleep for a good 7 hours, 7.5 hours, but they don't feel restored. What we call non-restorative sleep. They feel like just as tired as they did when they went to sleep. Now, there are other conditions that can cause that other than insomnia. Insomnia is a symptom. In other words, it's a manifestation of various sleep disorders. But then there's an insomnia diagnosis. That's when they don't have other conditions like sleep apnea, for instance. Insomnia and sleep apnea are the most common sleep disorders. And we'll talk about sleep apnea in a bit. But these are the features of insomnia. But someone who has non-restorative sleep or has any of these features of difficulty sleeping, initiating, staying asleep, or early morning awakening could also have sleep apnea, but they're having the insomnia symptom manifestation. So that's something that we need to be careful of, that a diagnosis of insomnia is made by a qualified healthcare provider or sleep physician, and not by yourself based on just checking off these symptoms.
So would somebody start with their primary care physician then, if they have those symptoms?
Yeah, and they can actually have a conversation with them. What we found is some people are shy to talk to people about sleep because they think it's not mainstream medicine. It is, and it has huge connections. We know more and more now compared to when I started training in sleep to now. It is very, very relevant to your health. So you should talk to your primary care physician about that, and they would do the appropriate next step. They may ask you a few questions to qualify to make sure they know what would be the next step. Should we do a sleep study to look for sleep apnea, or should we just, treat you for your insomnia right away? That would depend upon what your risk for having sleep apnea is, and what are some of the other symptoms that you may have. So if you have restless legs, and you have insomnia symptoms, you have restless legs. Your restless legs needs to be treated with iron pills if you're iron deficient, or medication to soothe the irritation in your legs and make you fall asleep. But if you're having insomnia symptoms and you're snoring and stopping to breathe at night, that means you're sleep apnea. Your sleep apnea needs to be diagnosed with a sleep study and be adequately, appropriately treated. However, if you have insomnia symptoms and you don't have features of restless legs or sleep apnea, it's just snoring and stopping to breathe at night and waking up in the morning with a dry mouth, then you probably have insomnia. If you're of the right, if you're skinny, not overweight, and you don't have other cardiac conditions, then it is okay for you to go towards an insomnia diagnosis and get treated for the insomnia. And so that's sort of in a nutshell. So the health ramifications of sleep are it can cause inflammation. And inflammation, folks, is essentially one of the reasons why we develop heart disease, and they're one of the reasons why we develop cancer. Chronic low-lying inflammation can cause cancer in the long term. Chronic low levels of inflammation for many, many years can also cause rupture of plaques and cause, heart attacks. And so inflammation is very important because, it's almost like, in snow country, you have, some drizzles and rains, and then you have icy rain and, your, freezing temperature. You form these patches of ice on your driveway or in the road. And that's essentially the plaques, formed due to high cholesterol in our blood vessels. But those ice patches don't shatter or break on their own. You need to put an ice pick to it for it to shatter or break. While the cholesterol is the one that forms the patch of ice or plaque, what breaks that ice is inflammation. So having poor sleep, can cause inflammation. Having undiagnosed sleep apnea can cause inflammation. And having insomnia can cause inflammation, as I'll show you in just a bit. And so they add to that to create problems for cardiovascular disease. So what I'm showing you here is a 40-year-long study that we published in 2015. It was called the Tucson Epidemiological Study of Area Obstructive Disease, or the TESOD study, which was originally done back in 1971. It was initiated to address the origins of emphysema. That was the reason why it was initiated. But they happened to put some sleep questions in there. And what we found was that people who have poor sleep or insomnia are more likely to die earlier when we follow them over 20 years. What you see there in the graph on the left side is that we measured insomnia symptoms twice, or about 5 years apart. And the ones who had insomnia symptoms on both occasions in the early 1980s and mid to late 1990s, so about 5 to 7 years, they are in red. That means they have persistent insomnia. And you can see that they're dying at a faster pace over the next 20 years than people who had never insomnia. They never gave insomnia symptoms, either in the first survey or the second survey, and they are in the green line. You can see that, yeah, I mean, when we age, we all die. We're all going to die. But not at the rate at which people with persistent insomnia did. And then people in blue line were the people who had intermittent insomnia. In other words, they had insomnia symptoms either in one or the other survey that were done about 5 years apart. And you can see that their risk is somewhere in between, but certainly not as bad as the ones in the red tracing, who, there was essentially a 35% mortality rate in that group over a 20-year follow-up period, which is much more than the 17% death rate in the green line over a 20-year period. Now, what was the level of inflammation in them? That's in the right panel. It's called C-reactive protein, or CRP. This is something your primary care physician probably checks you for when you have a cholesterol test done, because they want to see how much inflammation there is in your body. It's a marker for inflammation. And they use that to decide whether to give you a cholesterol-lowering medication or not if you have borderline cholesterol levels. Of course, if you have clearly high levels, they will treat you immediately. But like I said, the cholesterol creates the ice block. The ice pick that shatters the ice block is the CRP, or the inflammation. And so what you see in the right panel is that in people with never, on the left side, intermittent insomnia in the middle, or persistent insomnia on the right side, back in 1971, the black dots signify how much of CRP level they had. They had very low levels. But over 20 years, you can see that their CRP level floats up, because as we age, we have more inflammation in our body. You can see that it crept up in the never insomnia patients. It crept up in the intermittent insomnia people. But in the people with persistent insomnia, you can see it dramatically increased. And to a point that it's almost half of them are about level of 3, which is what we use as a measure, suggesting that that is a high CRP level that needs treatment with a cholesterol-lowering medication or a statin. So what we found is that now in the people with severe insomnia or persistent insomnia, they have higher levels of inflammation. And as I said, this is the inflammation that causes cardiovascular-related death due to clot rupture. And when we went back to see, yeah, these people died in the red group and in the, people with persistent insomnia, but what did they die of? What did their death certificates say? We found that overwhelming majority of them died of cardiovascular disease, suggesting that the CRP goes along with that, and it perfectly made sense to us. So sleep is anti-inflammatory, and if you don't get enough sleep, it's pro-inflammatory. In other words, it increases the inflammation in your body, and we all understand that inflammation is not good. It's not good for the body. And so what about hospitalization? We said in the same group, 40-year follow-up, we said, okay, people without insomnia, or people with persistent insomnia, intermittent insomnia, how likely are they to get hospitalized? And you can see in these pie diagrams, people with persistent insomnia, 47.8% of them got hospitalized. There's only 19% of people with never insomnia got hospitalized. These are thousands of patients, not patients. I mean, these are community dwelling individuals that were part of the study of about 10,000 individuals. And you can see that there is a difference. Of course, as part of this study, there's only about 1,100 or 1,200 of them. And so what is the risk for hospitalization due to any cause, it's 2.5 to 3-fold risk for getting hospitalized if someone has insomnia. And if you parcel it out as cardiovascular versus cancer, you can see that cardiovascular related hospitalization is 10-fold higher in those with insomnia than those without insomnia. Similarly, that with cancer, but you can see that those bar diagrams become wider because the number of people in those groups gets smaller and smaller. Pain, lack of sleep will make you perceive more pain. Sleep is actually a balm that soothes your body of pain. And when you don't get enough sleep, you're going to feel more pain. This is a research study that was done where they made volunteers touch a sharp needle which was heated to a particular temperature that can make you say ouch. And the previous night, the same individual was allowed to do either 8 hours or 6 hours or 4 hours of sleep only. So I had to do, if I'm a subject, I would have to do the study on 3 different days, where the previous night I got either 8 or 6 or 4 hours. It could be in a random manner that it could get assigned. And then they would check to see how long I can keep my finger on that heated, sharp needle. The longer I can keep it means my pain threshold was higher. That means I tolerate pain better. The shorter I keep it means that I'm more sensitive to the pain and I withdraw my finger very quickly. So you can see here that someone who sleeps 4 hours, is only able to keep their finger on the needle for about 9 seconds, as opposed to someone who sleeps, for 8 hours. The same individual, not about different individuals and their difference in pain sensory. Same individual. When they slept, a good 8 hours, they were able to keep the finger on the heated, sharp needle for 13 seconds or more, suggesting that our own perception of pain and our tolerance for pain is a function of how much sleep we get. And so when we talk about arthritic pain and how arthritic pain affects your sleep and therefore how it affects your pain perception the next day, it becomes a vicious cycle. So we're actually doing some research on this with the Arthritis Center here to look at the connection between pain, perception, and sleep. And so it's very, very telling, the connection that we are finding. Obesity,
That's interesting.
Lack of sleep can lead us to gain weight. And, this is an obesity pandemic that's going on. I used to use the word pandemic, but now as I say that word, I'm recoiling that, I used it glibly in the past. Of course, we have the COVID pandemic now. But the nation has changed in terms of, the number of proportion of people by each state that are overweight or obese. And we are continuing to gain weight as a country. But what I'm going to share here is that we have 2 hormones in our body. At any given point in time, whether we're going to reach for that food or cake or whatnot in front of me, depends upon how much hunger hormone I have and how much satiety hormone I have. Hunger hormone is ghrelin, satiety hormone is leptin. And so what the study found is that if someone had disturbed sleep or less sleep, as shown in the left panel, and as shown by these green lines, they have less levels of this green hormone or leptin. If someone sleeps 12 hours, they have a lot more of the leptin hormone, which is the satiety hormone, which says, hey, you're satiated. You don't need to reach for the extra piece of food. And so this is what's happening if we lose sleep and we try to burn the midnight, candle on both sides, we end up eating not only more food, but we also crave more salty and fat-rich diet. So not only do we eat more, we also eat more of these high-caloric foods. And so research studies have been shown when they're given a tray after 8 hours of sleep, kind of food that people choose, versus the kind of food that people choose after getting 4 hours of sleep. And they can see that more people go for the fries and the burgers and the bread rather than, green leafy vegetables or, protein and eggs and things of that nature. So we know that increases the caloric consumption, but it also makes us choose poorly with regards to the food that we eat. Cognition, poor sleep can also affect our brain function. I alluded to this about the brain being scrubbed off the bad humor, the beta amyloid protein during high tide. and not doing that can cause that to accumulate. And these are the 17 medical conditions, and Alzheimer's is top amongst that. These are the 17 medical conditions that drive the healthcare GDP. 37% of our GDP, gross domestic product, goes towards healthcare, and probably more during the COVID pandemic. But these are the disease conditions that drive them. Each and every one of these disease conditions is connected to sleep in some form or the other. And safety. It's very important for us to be safe. We can maintain perfect health, but still get into an accident, and everything can be, undone. This is essentially national data of single motor vehicle accidents that's happened in the United States back in 1994. Essentially what they did was they looked at 4,333 highway crashes, which were single vehicle. Single vehicle means it was essentially the driver error. If it's two vehicle clash, then that means, the other person could be at fault. So this is only single person motor vehicle accident crashes. Out of 4,333, if you put the time when they occurred, based on the military time, which is going from midnight to 23 hours, 24 hours, and you look at the pattern, you can see there are two, peaks there. One is in the wee hours of the morning, because that's when people are the sleepiest, and then there's the early afternoon, little or late afternoon snooze that we feel coming on after we eat a meal. So that's why you see those two peaks. Of course, the peak at 5 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. in the morning is the highest. And this coincides with, if I were to make someone play a video game to see how vigilant they are over a 24-hour period, their vigilance would track very much similarly. That's because our brain is meant to sleep both in the middle of the night and perhaps also for a mid-afternoon snooze. So in the before modern, industrial revolution and whatnot, people used to take a nap in the early afternoon. Even now, in Asia, in South America, the shops shutter their doors around about that time. There's, sort of like a little, meal time and a little nap time before the doors open again. And so even in some European countries, it's still the practice, although not so in the U.S. And so that's how we sort of evolved. That's because our brain is designed that way. It likes to sleep at night, but there's also a little dip in our attentiveness, in the early afternoon. And so, just to, I'm going to skip this. This has been studied by researchers that, that vigilance test that I said has been studied in 24-hour lab by researchers doing sleep and vigilance research. And so this is how our sleep center, research center, looks like. And so now, we are talking about wearables. So you can monitor your sleep. And, this is essentially, data that we have collected. Is the raw data, what it looks like in the innards of the watch or wearable that you're, using. This is a 30-day pattern of someone who works in the ICU. And you can see that someone who gets enough sleep has this black area on the left panel. It's almost like a little lane that you can drive a truck through. And this person is keeping at regular time and is getting good sleep. The person on the right is working long nights and staying up for 36 hours in a row every few nights. That's because the person is an ICU physician who is actually working overnight in the ICU, and they don't leave until the next day afternoon. So they put in 30 consecutive hours or 32 consecutive hours, and you can see that their sleep is messed up. There is no lane that you can drive a truck through over there. There's no dark lane there. So this is how, this is research we did back in 2006, before Fitbit and Apple Watch were popular. We used to do something called actigraphy, which would allow us to measure both their physical activity and their sleep. Problem is that, again, harkening back to the fact that, you need to take care of your health, but also when you go to see a provider, the provider needs to take care of their health so they can take good care of you. And so here you can see that, this physician seems like, he needs to sleep, a little bit more than what he's sleeping. And I know I'm making light of that, medical errors can happen. This is Josie King, whose life was snuffed away in an ivory tower institution, Johns Hopkins. because the nurse that was loading insulin into her nutrition bag was sleep deprived and ended up giving her 10 times the normal dose of insulin, and Josie ended up passing away. And this is Josie's mom, who decided that she didn't want to seek vengeance with Johns Hopkins, but she took it as her life mission. But what happened to her daughter should not happen to anyone again, and hence started the patient safety movement. She partnered with the same institution where her child died, with Johns Hopkins, along with a pediatric physician called Peter Pronovost, and they started the patient safety movement about the 100,000 Lives Saved campaign. It's because every year 100,000 patients die due to medical error, and we aren't as excited about it as if 80 people died due to a plane crash. That gets national media attention and a whole bunch of investigations and whatnot. So this led to the patient safety movement back in 2002 and continues today, and I believe lots and lots of lives are being saved as a result of that. And that ties to sleepiness in care providers as well. So it's just not sleepiness and sleep deprivation in folks. So it's led to this modern era of people wanting to know about their sleep, and this is one of those wearable devices that we tested. And we did a randomized control trial, and what we found was the people wearing a watch. First of all, we found that the watches are pretty darn good at measuring sleep. There are some watches, that we tested that didn't do well. But what I'm showing here is one of the watches that did well, which was off by only 4.2% in terms of measuring the duration of sleep compared to a gold standard, which is a sleep study. And what we found was the week that the same individuals were wearing the watch and maintaining a sleep log versus a week that they were not wearing a watch but maintaining a sleep log, the week that they were wearing the watch, they actually had better sleep quality. They slept more. They slept more regularly because they were actually getting feedback about how much they slept. So what this means is that when you monitor something, if you look at your cell phone and see how many steps you took that day, or if you look at your wearable and see how many steps you took that day or how many hours you slept, you're more likely to do more activity and more sleep. So we live in a new era of wearables and whatnot that you really need to be conscious of that. And if that's something that you can do, you may want to do that. Some of these devices can also sort of give you a suspicion or give you a heads up whether you have a risk for sleep apnea or not. So what is sleep apnea? And we talked about insomnia, so I'm going to finish off with sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is a condition where when you're asleep, the back of the throat closes up so that you can't breathe, you can't get enough oxygen, or you can't get air at that time. And so the nasopharynx and the oropharynx, these are parts of the throat in this cross-section where the airway collapses, and it collapses periodically. When I ask my patients, "Oh, do you stop breathing at night?" They're like, "What do you mean? How would I be alive if I stopped breathing? I don't stop breathing." But then their spouse tells them right at the moment, "No, there are times when you pause breathing." So no, you don't stop breathing, but you stop breathing momentarily, or what we call breathing pauses. That's a sign or symptom of sleep apnea, and it actually has a 95% positive predictive value. Someone says you pause breathing during your sleep, your chance for having sleep apnea is 95%. There are other times that we pause gently during sleep that can be misconstrued as apnea. But if you have loud snoring and you have pauses in breathing, or interrupted breathing, you have a high risk for having sleep apnea. And what that does is every time you pause breathing, you get less oxygen. And those are those green bars down at the bottom. It shows that you have periods of apnea. What's on top in yellow is called MSNA, is muscle sympathetic nervous activity. What that is your stress level. It's actually a measure of stress level. There's no other way of measuring stress, or your catecholamic or sympathetic drive, as we call it, and putting a very, very fine wire into a nerve, that's sort of on the funny bone of your leg on the side of your knee, just below your knee. It's called the sural nerve. And when we put that in there, we can actually see spikes and flashes of activity in that nerve, of this muscle sympathetic nerve activity, when the oxygen level goes down. In other words, every time you have a pause in breathing, even though you resume breathing, you're putting a lot of stress on your heart because your stress level goes up and your blood pressure shoots up and your heart rate shoots up. On the long term, this is not good. And this actually in animal research has shown to cause the development of high blood pressure or hypertension. So what are the other symptoms? As I said, loud snoring, pauses in breathing, waking up underfreshed in the morning, which I said could be a feature of insomnia, but could also be a feature of sleep apnea. Daytime sleepiness, gasping and choking at night, waking up with a dry throat. And I know my patients, some of them will say, "Oh, I don't have sleep apnea, doc. I just have a glass of water there. I have a dry throat because of medications, and I'm on a diuretic, and I just take a sip of water and I go back to sleep." It could be if you have the other symptoms, it could be a feature of sleep apnea. Waking up with a headache in the morning could mean that you're building up carbon dioxide because you're not breathing well at night. Nighttime urination or nocturia. Yeah, it could be due to diabetes. It could be due to water pills. It could be due to a prostate problem. But nocturia or nighttime urination 3 to 4 times a night can be a symptom of sleep apnea. What is more is that treatment of sleep apnea can actually make it better. And we've done that research and shown that. Cause fatigue during the day, disturbed sleep, poor memory. What are some of the signs? Being overweight. Of course, skinny people can also have sleep apnea. It's just not only people are overweight. Having a neck collar size more than 17 inches for men, 16.5 for women. A crowded throat or enlarged tonsils, obstruction of nose. People with heart disease ranging from high blood pressure or prior history of heart attack or heart failure, or having a low oxygen count during the daytime. So those are all, various symptoms and signs of sleep apnea. And I just wanted to, sort of end with this slide to say that, sleep, is very cross-cutting. We talk about sleep saying, oh, it's insomnia or sleep apnea. No. We talked about the master clock before, and how the master clock is aligned to the spin of the earth. But folks, each and every cell in your body has a clock in it. And those little tiny clocks are in sync and synchronized with the master clock. And so some of these cells can get deranged differentially if you don't keep a regular bed and wake time. So you may see some of the new smartphones talk about, oh, you need to have a regular sleep and wake time. United Kingdom study showed that outside of sleep loss or sleeping excessively or being sleepy or whatnot, people who kept regular bed and wake times, they actually were healthier, lived longer than people who had erratic sleep. And because you're in the zone, your body is humming and it's in sync with the brain and your master clock and the environment, and you're one of nature. It's only when we get into these artificial rooms and have artificial lights and burn the midnight oil, we end up messing up all of these cells in the entire body, not just the brain. And some of you, back in the day before COVID, when we used to do, jet international travel across time zones or whatnot, some people may have a GI issue, or they may have a cognition issue when they go past time zones, and it takes a little time for it to settle down. That's because the clocks in your liver and the clocks in your gut and the clocks in your brain all are in a different phase lag, and it takes them a few days for them to limp and get back into synchrony. And otherwise, you're desynchronized internally. Your liver is in one time, your gut is in one time, your brain's one time, your heart is in one time. And so there's a lot we are gaining to understand. And what we're also finding is that clock derangement can also lead to cancer. These are essentially mice that don't have an immune system. So yeah, this is an experiment. And what happens is that during the day, our cells divide in our skin. And at night, they don't, divide. They don't divide during the day, they divide at night. It's because when the DNA unseals itself, it exposes itself to the bad humor of activity that's there during the day. And so when these mice were obliterated of their rhythm, they were more likely to develop cancer because the cells divided at random times are exposed to all the bad humor. So what this means is that beauty sleep is a thing. In other words, when cells are dividing at the wrong time and you don't have rhythm, they're usually protected. It's like saying, when you're opening your purse full of cash, you don't want to be opening it outside the bank. You want to be opening it inside the bank. And so when you open it outside the bank, other people are going to know how much cash you have in your purse, and you're going to be at risk of theft. That's what's happening here. The DNA is being unzipped during the day when there's bad humor around, and the bad humor attacks the DNA and can lead to the development of cancer. And this was a very elegant experiment shown that way. So it's very important for cardiac reasons and cognition reasons and all the reasons that we mentioned, including cancer, that your sleep and your circadian rhythm is very important. I'll end there and and take some questions. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Would you say, are there any other things that we can do to get a really good night's sleep? I know you mentioned getting exposure to light in the morning, and also going to bed and getting up at the same time each day, and that it helps to track your sleep, just being aware of when you're sleeping. What else would you suggest to people?
Yeah, no, it's almost like, I set up that question there, right? And so it's the take-home messages. It's important to maintain good sleep hygiene.
Okay.
What are the things that are known to make your sleep worse? Napping during the day makes your sleep worse at night. So try not to nap during the day. Watching television in bed is bad. Don't do that because it stimulates the brain, and then it associates the bed with watching TV rather than associating the bed with sleep. Using a device with bright light an hour before bedtime is bad, like a smartphone, a laptop, or iPad, because that'll mess up the protein and the master clock in your brain and push away your bedtime. Then when you turn off the lights, you're just lying there, staring into the dark, ceiling. Consuming caffeine or caffeine-containing stuff like tea, coffee, cola, energy drinks, or even hot chocolate, or even literally chocolate. Close to bedtime because of that caffeine and messes up. I usually say don't consume caffeinated products past 4 p.m., but it's
4 p.m.
people. Yeah. But
some people are more sensitive.
After 2 o'clock, even after 2 o'clock, it may affect them. So I would say coffee is generally for the morning and early afternoon, but try not to drink caffeine definitely after 4 p.m.
Okay.
And then how much coffee do you drink a day? You might want to, keep tabs of that. I lose count myself sometimes. And what time of the day was your last coffee drink? Having a nightcap is not good for your sleep. It may help people segue into sleep, but it is actually disruptive to sleep and can actually increase the risk for sleep apnea. And although it's socially acceptable to have a glass of wine with dinner, and obviously not a glass of wine with breakfast, but having alcohol within 3 to 4 hours of bedtime, a glass of wine is okay at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. when you're having dinner, but having a nightcap, something heavier just before bedtime as a way of being able to slip right into sleep is not a good approach. And also eating a heavy meal. You're eating a heavy meal, the food goes in your stomach, and you go to bed, and the stomach is grinding away because that's the time the stomach needs to do its work. And that's connected by nerves to your brain, and it's going to give you difficulty falling asleep. So giving, again, if your dinner is at 6 o'clock with a glass of wine, going to bed at 10 o'clock, giving it about 3 to 4 hours, 9 or 10 is probably, a good 3-hour margin that you give there. Same thing with activity. You don't want to do a lot of strenuous physical activity close to within 3 hours of bedtime because it revs up the brain and prevents the brain from being able to, fall asleep. The other thing is you don't want to be lying in bed, and if you can't fall asleep for 30 minutes roughly, don't have a clock next to the bed, or worse still, I've seen people have these projectors that projects the clock digitally onto the ceiling. You don't want to do that. You don't want to have a clock, especially if you have difficulty sleeping, because you really don't want to be watching time. But roughly, if it's been about a half an hour and you're not able to sleep for some reason on a particular day because you're stressed, things happened or whatnot, get out of bed, go to a place, look at a magazine, paper, something, like a coffee table magazine, nothing, not like the exciting thriller that you have left off halfway, but something that is kind of boring, and not something with a digital screen or LCD screen that may affect your sleep.
What about reading in bed? Would you recommend that, or is that too, kind of stimulating and keep you awake?
Yeah, we don't recommend that.
Okay.
But then I have, I live with someone who's reads in bed and she has no problem falling asleep. So
maybe it depends on the person.
Yeah, exactly. When I say that, I'm not saying it categorically. It really depends on you. And if you are gifted that you can fall asleep easily, and you can read a book, go for it. But if you're having sleep difficulties and you're reading in bed, you shouldn't be doing it. So.
Okay.
And so what are the things that you can do to improve your sleep? We just talked about things you shouldn't be doing. Things that you could be doing is doing regular exercise, doing exercise earlier in the day, not within 3 hours of bedtime. How many times a week are you doing? It's recommended that you do at least 3 times or 30 minutes. The time of day, like I said, don't do it within 3 to 4 hours of bedtime. This is actually one of my mentors who came up with this concept. There are some people who lie in bed, that's when they start mulling about things. And he used to say, have a worry book, and you set aside a worry time. And you jot down all your worries there and mull over them during the day at a designated time. And
that's
so
a good
that
idea.
You try to compartmentalize it. Yeah, again, it works for some people. In some people, it doesn't work. But I like to share that with people because my mentor mentioned that to me. That's something he uses. And relaxation exercise, it could be breathing exercises. It could be yoga. Those are good things that you could be doing. And having a routine, a bedtime routine, having a regular bed and wake time also. That way your brain's starting to prep towards it. And setting the conditions right for sleep. So if it's freezing cold or if it's super hot, or the window's open and there's traffic noise or other noise, certainly that's not a good situation. So it should be conducive for sleep, but at the same time it should be safe for you. If you have to get up at night to be able to go, you want to have some floor lighting to make sure people don't slip and fall. Make sure it's completely dark, except like I said, for the safety thing about having a little bit of light on the ground. And make sure the mattress and pillows are comfortable. A lot of entire industry is going around trying to be remarkably great based on the pillows and mattress. They do count, they do matter, and they can affect sleep. There could be other reasons for sleep problems as well, but certainly paying attention to them is a good thing. The temperature is a factor. I've myself seen how my sleep in winter is different than my sleep in summer. Anecdotally, and we know that the body's core body temperature is closely tied to the circadian rhythm, and it gives internal cues for sleep and wake time. And so we do think that it should be the right temperature. There's no magic right temperature, it's just the right temperature for you. But of course, if you share your bed with someone with a different right temperature, then you're in trouble, like me. So those were the take-home messages for what are the things you should be doing and the things you should not be doing for June.
Okay. Now, I had a couple of people ask me before this program, are there any foods that you should either eat that would help you sleep or avoid that would disrupt your sleep? Do you have any recommendations for that?
Yeah, we talked about the caffeinated products, right?
Right.
And having anything with caffeine is going to mess up your sleep. And even in people in whom they say it doesn't mess up sleep, it makes their sleep lighter. So it's not conducive for, good sleep. In terms of food, there's various folks selling over-the-counter natural products. Some of them are herbal remedies, herbal tea, things that are meant to soothe and make your sleep better with tea-related alkaloids and things of that nature. I think they are a thing. It's just that we really don't have sufficient data on them that we can use. There are people who have asked me about, CBD. In fact, the Canadian Institute of Health Research, CHR, is actually funding a study for studying CBD oil for insomnia. And so a lot of these are there. there are some people selling, medications that can actually, amino acid solutions that's supposed to help sleep, but they're all being poorly studied. So I can't say anything in favor of a particular food or supplement that would favor sleep one way or the other. But there are, the NICAN, National Institute of Complementary Alternative Medicine, and the National Institute of Health is trying to, figure this out in terms of, does ginseng really give you more vitality? And, does the valerian extract, root extract, help you sleep better? There's the researchers in New York, Marie St. Onge, who's actually studying the effect of food per se on sleep. So if you eat a high carbohydrate, high starch food, are you more likely to be sleepy versus if you ate more of a higher protein diet with less carbohydrate content? So I was talking about sort of supplements and caffeine and such, but if you go to real foods, there is good reasons to believe that the kind of food you eat will influence your sleep. I mean, anecdotally, I know personally, if I ate Asian food with MSG, I have more dreams that night. So we all have these anecdotal observations, and that's the thing, it's not your imagination. And so you may want to, avoid some of these that are messing up your sleep. It is a thing.
Okay. And then one last question. Someone asked me, is there any evidence behind things like the scent of lavender and some of the like bedtime lotions that are supposed to make you sleepy? Or is that more of a, just something that helps you in your bedtime routine?
Yeah, it may be one of those sort of bedtime associations as well. I know there are some very professional sleep medicine organizations, and they used to have this lavender extract in the bedrooms. They're turnkey operations that go around building sleep labs across the country. And they had a formal-like approach to building a sleep lab, and in terms of the color, in terms of the bedding, as well as in terms of the fragrance. And they were big on these sort of lavender incense sticks that they put in. So the moment you go in, have this pleasant smell. I think it's a form of relaxation technique, and it helps you sort of wind down and relax and soothe so that your brain is conducive for going into the next stage of sleep. And I do think that there is value to that. But in terms of rigorous study and doing a research study to compare them head on, that data is lacking.
Okay. All right. Well, do you have anything else that you think that we should know?
Yeah, I think what is relevant or contextual, I just wanted to share very quickly, is that we are doing some research on looking at how sleep and the COVID pandemic are related. We do think sleep is very important for the immune system, and there is data suggesting that if someone slept well before they get the flu shot or before they get the hepatitis vaccine, they have a more robust immune system response to the vaccine itself. So what I would suggest is that if you are in the queue, in the lineup, not in the queue obviously because it's too late, in the 3 days run up to when you think you're going to get your vaccine, make sure you get sufficient amount of sleep, because you will have more of a robust response to. Now, do we know that for the COVID vaccine? We don't. The COVID vaccine is supposed to be 95% effective to 90% effective, depending on which vaccine you're talking, but there are some vaccines which are only 65% effective. But that's all in healthy volunteers. What we don't know is what it is like in people who have underlying medical conditions and other problems or issues that may predispose them to developing COVID. We don't know what the protection rate is in those people. So you want to increase your chances for the vaccine to work better for you. And so the more sleep you get, the 3 nights prior, the better off you are. So just a little tidbit.
Oh, that's really good to know. So, well, I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. We really appreciate it. And any last words for us?
That's about it. So stay safe and make sure you get the vaccine.
Okay, thank you, and have a good day.
You too. Take care.
All right.
Want to learn more? Check out these library books on sleep. Place requests at mcldaz.org and pick them up at your library. How to Sleep can be downloaded from the Freeding app or at mcldaz.org/emedia. These library resources may help you create a bedtime routine. Some items may be downloaded from the Libby Overdrive, Freegal, and Hoopla apps or at mcldaz.org/emedia. Thanks for joining us for today's MCLD Now program. We hope you will view other programs and take advantage of all the services the library has to offer.